The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, one of those ordinary gray hours when life feels like it's holding its breath. I had just set my chipped coffee mug down on the desk and adjusted the stack of bills I hadn't yet opened when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, glowing sharply on the screen. Something in my stomach twisted before I even answered. "Hello, is this Emily Carter?" the voice asked, steady and businesslike. "Yes," I replied, cautious, my hand tightening around the phone. "This is Charles from Liberty National Bank. We're calling regarding your overdue mortgage balance of $523,000. We've sent several notices." The words stopped making sense after that. Mortgage. 523,000. My ears buzzed with disbelief. I didn't own a house. I didn't even own a new car. "You must have the wrong person," I said, my voice trembling, though I tried to sound firm. But the man didn't waver. "Ma'am, the documents we have show your full name, date of birth, and social security number. You are listed as the primary borrower on a loan taken out 3 years ago." 3 years ago. My heart plummeted. That was around the same time Jessica, my younger sister, had been talking about wanting a bigger house, a yard with space for parties, a dream she couldn't afford but insisted she deserved. I froze, the hum of my computer fan suddenly unbearably loud in the silence around me. I wanted to deny it, to insist on some clerical error, but deep down an icy suspicion wrapped its fingers around my ribs. Jessica with her Pinterest boards. Jessica showing off remodel ideas at family dinners. Jessica with my parents nodding indulgently, assuring her she deserved nothing less than the best. And me, the responsible one, the quiet one, the invisible one. After the call, I pressed my palms to my eyes until colors flared behind the lids. My one-bedroom apartment, usually my small sanctuary, suddenly felt like it was caving in. I wanted to scream, but instead I pulled open every drawer, searching for a piece of paper that could prove this wasn't real. Old tax forms, bank statements, credit card bills, none of it mattered. The betrayal was already coiling in my chest. Because if it wasn't a mistake, then there was only one explanation. They had done this to me. My own family had done this to me. I thought of all the times my parents had said, "You don't need help, you're the strong one." All the times Jessica had faltered, failed classes, lost jobs, broken leases, and they cushioned her fall while praising me for needing nothing. They had turned me into the background character in my own story, and now they had written me into a role I had never agreed to, guarantor of their dreams. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a text from my mother. "Hey, sweetheart, hope you're having a good week. Family dinner Sunday." Family dinner. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been told I was shackled to $500,000 of debt. I typed sure and hit send, my hands numb. Because before I could explode, before accusations tore out of me, I needed the truth. And once I had it, I would decide whether my response would be quiet as ash or loud enough to burn the house down. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the cracks in my ceiling, tracing them like fault lines, wondering when everything had begun to fracture. By morning, I was hunched at the kitchen table, untouched coffee going cold beside me, laptop open, tabs multiplying like weeds. Mortgage fraud. Forged signatures. Legal advice. My heart pounded as I called the bank again, demanding copies of the documents. Minutes later, a PDF landed in my inbox. I clicked it open, breath caught in my throat, eyes scanning line after line. My name, my information, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The loops were too perfect, too rehearsed, as if someone had practiced until the forgery was flawless to anyone who didn't know the real me. But I knew. I knew the quiver in my hand when I signed under stress. I knew the way my last name always slanted slightly upward. This signature was a stranger wearing my face. How could they do this? How could my own parents forge me into chains I never agreed to wear? My vision blurred, but I forced myself to keep reading, flipping through pages that bound me tighter with every clause, every term, every initial. It was like watching my own future being stolen in slow motion. I remembered Jessica showing off her shiny new car after flunking out of college. My mom saying, "You're the strong one, Emmy. Jess needs extra." My dad patting my head like a dog when I graduated the ceremony, half empty of family who couldn't make it. I had carried everything they threw on me without complaint. And now they had gambled my future without even the courtesy of telling me. By evening, I had stacked the papers neatly on the kitchen table. It wasn't order, it was evidence, a silent promise to myself. The girl who bent backward to be the good daughter was gone. Sunday came too fast. I stood outside my parents' house, the same door I'd run through as a child, scraped knees and hopeful smiles. Now it felt like the entrance to a courtroom. Part of me wanted to run to pretend this was a nightmare, but another part, colder and sharper, held me still. When my mother opened the door, her smile was warm, practiced. Emmy, so glad you could make it, sweetheart. Sweetheart, the word stung. Inside, the smell of pot roast wrapped around me like a trap. My father sat half watching a football game, beer in hand. Jessica lounged on the couch, her designer purse tossed carelessly beside her, scrolling her phone. No one looked at me with anything but casual disinterest, as though I hadn't been marked with their betrayal. Dinner unfolded like every other Sunday. My mother doted on Jessica. My father grunted at the game. Jessica complained about landscaping costs for her sprawling yard. The air was thick with their easy comfort, while inside me a storm gathered. Finally, after plates were cleared, I spoke. My voice was steady, quiet. Hey, I have a question. 3 sets of eyes turned toward me, mild curiosity flickering. Does anyone know anything about a mortgage with my name on it? Silence. Thick, heavy silence. The ticking of the wall clock roared in the stillness. Jessica shifted, pulling her sleeves down nervously. My mother's smile faltered. My father coughed into his hand. I didn't accuse, I didn't rage, I simply waited. My mother broke first, her voice too soft, too rehearsed. Honey, listen, it's not a big deal. It's family. Jessica just needed help qualifying, that's all. You're not actually paying anything. Not a big deal. Jessica's voice joined in defensive sharp. You have good credit, Em. I don't. It's not fair you wouldn't help. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork. I leaned back, letting their words hang like smoke in the air. They weren't ashamed. They didn't even think it was wrong. They had convinced themselves I was the selfish one for daring to question it. Thanks for explaining, I said evenly. Jessica shrugged, already reaching for her phone again. My mother beamed, thinking the storm had passed. My father turned back to the game. None of them saw what I carried behind my calm eyes. None of them realized the storm wasn't gone, it was gathering, and when it broke, it would be too late for them to hide. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silence. Their words spun through my head like a carousel of cruelty. It's just paperwork, it's not a big deal. Family helps family. I thought of every time I picked up Jessica's mess, every sacrifice I had made, every quiet moment. I swallowed my pride to keep the peace, and now $500,000 in my name, without a warning, without a choice. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the dark hands, gripping the steering wheel, betrayal settling like a stone in my chest. And then something shifted. This wasn't just the moment they had stolen from me. It was the moment they had freed me. Because now there were no illusions left, no fragile thread of trust to cling to, nothing left to protect. And in that nothing, I felt something new, clarity. I went inside, shed my coat, and opened my laptop. Not to search for explanations this time, but for solutions. Mortgage fraud attorneys, identity theft steps, articles about suing family, removing names from loans. The world had never felt colder, but for the first time I felt awake. If they expected me to roll over to swallow this betrayal like I had swallowed so many before, they didn't know me at all. The following morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach that no amount of coffee could untangle. The papers still lay spread across my kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene, except the crime was against me, and the criminals were the people who were supposed to protect me, my parents, my sister. Family, the word felt like acid in my mouth now. I sat in front of the stack for nearly an hour, tracing my finger over the fake signature again and again. Whoever had done it had been careful, deliberate. It wasn't a sloppy act of desperation. It was premeditated. They had practiced until it looked like me. Until it could fool a bank. Until it could bury me alive under someone else's dream. My phone buzzed again, another number from the bank. I didn't answer this time. Instead, I opened my email and started writing to an attorney whose name I had circled 3 times the night before. The subject line was simple fraud involving family members. I hit send before I could hesitate. And just like that, the first domino tipped. But the truth is, betrayal doesn't just make you angry, it makes you remember. It drags every old wound to the surface and demands you look at it again. As I sat there, memories pressed in on me like ghosts. I remembered being 16 when Jessica crashed my car after taking it without permission. My parents had turned to me, not her, and asked why I wasn't more careful with my things. I remembered college when I was working 2 jobs to pay rent, and Jessica called crying because she had maxed out her credit cards on vacations. My parents bailed her out, praising her bravery for asking for help. I remembered holidays when every gift, every compliment, every ounce of attention was funneled to her while I was the dependable shadow in the corner. And through it all, I stayed quiet. Because that's what good daughters do. They endure. They don't cause scenes. They clean up the mess and move on. But this wasn't spilled milk or another broken promise. This was $500,000 strapped to my name like a time bomb. And I wasn't going to be their scapegoat anymore. The attorney called back the next day. Her voice was sharp, clipped, efficient. She didn't coddle me. She didn't soften the truth. If your parents and sister forged your signature, that's felony fraud. You can press charges, but you need to be ready for a war. A war. The word didn't scare me. I had been at war my whole life, just not with strangers, not with bosses, not with bills. My war had always been in the quiet corners of my family home, in the invisible wounds of favoritism, in the way love had always been conditional and one-sided. Maybe this time I would finally let the battle out into the open. The attorney told me to gather everything: emails, texts, the documents the bank had sent, even handwriting samples. I spent hours combing through old drawers, pulling out birthday cards signed by Jessica, notes from my mother, scraps of writing from my father. I lined them up next to the forged signature. The similarities screamed at me, and for the first time I wasn't imagining the betrayal. It was right there in ink. That Sunday, another text came from my mother. Dinner at 6. Don't forget dessert. Dessert. Like nothing was wrong. Like they hadn't detonated my future and left me to crawl through the rubble. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Then I typed back, "I'll be there." Because if they thought I was still the quiet daughter, the one who swallowed everything and smiled, they needed to see just how wrong they were. Walking into that house felt different this time. The walls looked smaller, the air heavier. My father barely looked up from his chair. Jessica laughed at something on her phone. My mother fussed with the table settings, humming softly, pretending this was just another Sunday. But I wasn't pretending anymore. Halfway through dinner, I set my fork down. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't tremble. I spoke with a lawyer. The silence that followed was immediate, sharp as a knife. Jessica's head snapped up. My mother's smile froze. My father cleared his throat, trying to mask his unease. "What lawyer?" my mother asked, her voice strained. "The kind that deals with fraud," I said evenly. "The kind that sends people to prison for forging signatures." Jessica's face paled. "Em, you can't be serious. It's just paperwork. Families help each other." "No," I cut her off, my voice louder than I meant. "Families don't steal from each other. Families don't chain their daughters to $500,000 of debt and then lie about it." My father slammed his hand on the table, the sound making dishes rattle. "Enough. We did what we had to do. Jessica needed help. You're stronger, you'll manage." Something inside me snapped, then not in rage, but in clarity. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth I had been avoiding my whole life. I was never a daughter to them. I was a tool, a safety net, a sacrifice. I leaned forward, my voice calm but cold. "No, I won't manage. You will. Because when this goes to court, it's not my life on trial, it's yours." Jessica's eyes filled with tears, crocodile tears that once would have softened me. My mother reached for my hand, whispering, "Emmy, please don't do this. We're family." I pulled my hand back. "Exactly, and you destroyed that." The rest of the night blurred, their voices clashing in desperation, anger, denial. But nothing they said mattered anymore. I walked out of that house with the weight of their betrayal still heavy on me, but for the first time it wasn't crushing me. It was fueling me. At home, I opened my laptop again, drafted a statement for the attorney, and pressed send. Each word felt like cutting a cord, severing myself from the chains they had bound me with. The storm was no longer gathering. It had broken. And this time I wasn't the one who was going to drown. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new kind of battlefield, one where the weapons were paperwork, subpoenas, and whispered secrets dragged into the light. Every morning I woke up with the same knot in my stomach, but instead of paralyzing me, it pushed me forward. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing for war. The attorney moved quickly. She filed motions, requested official handwriting analysis, and contacted the bank directly to freeze any further damage. Each step was a confirmation that what had been done to me wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. For years, I had let my parents' favoritism bruise me in silence. But this time, there would be no silence. At night, though, the weight of it all came crashing down. I would sit alone in my tiny apartment surrounded by stacks of documents, and the memories would creep in again. My mother braiding Jessica's hair while I struggled with homework alone. My father praising Jessica's courage when she quit yet another job, while ignoring my long hours spent building a career. I realized then that this mortgage wasn't just about money. It was the final chapter in a story they had been writing for decades. A story where Jessica was always the chosen one, and I was the sacrifice. One evening my phone rang. It was Jessica. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was tight, frantic. Em, please, you don't understand. I need that house. My life will fall apart if you take this away from me. I bit back the bitter laugh rising in my throat. Your life is built on my back, Jess. On my name, my credit, my future. How many times do you get to destroy me before it's enough? You're so dramatic, she snapped, her voice cracking with desperation. It's not like you were using that credit anyway. You'll be fine. You always are. And there it was, the mantra of my life. You'll be fine. The phrase that excused every betrayal, every wound. The phrase that turned me invisible. Not this time, I said quietly before ending the call. The attorney advised me not to have further contact, but I knew my family wouldn't stay silent. Sure enough, the next Sunday, I found my mother waiting outside my apartment. She held a Tupperware container of cookies like some peace offering, her eyes red from crying. Emmy, she whispered, please don't do this. Think of what it will do to the family, to Jessica, to us. I stared at her, the woman who had raised me, the woman who had taught me to always put others first. For a moment, my chest ached with longing for her to finally see me, to finally choose me. But then I remembered the phone call from the bank, the forged signature, the $500,000 suffocating me while she smiled like nothing had happened. I am thinking of the family, I said. For the first time, I'm thinking of me. Her face crumpled, but I didn't let her in. I closed the door gently but firmly, and for the rest of the night, I sat against it, shaking with both grief and relief. When the court date arrived, the weight of years pressed against my shoulders. I walked into that room, not as the quiet daughter they had always dismissed, but as the woman who had finally found her voice. My father glared from across the aisle, jaw set in defiance. Jessica sobbed theatrically, her hands clasped in her lap. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. The evidence spoke louder than any of them could. The bank records, the forged documents, the handwriting analysis that matched my father's pen strokes and Jessica's loops. The jury didn't need convincing. The betrayal was etched in black and white. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied as the truth poured out. I told them about the phone call from the bank, about the lies, about the lifetime of being the forgotten daughter. I told them about the Sunday dinners where I was invisible, and the night I found out I was shackled to a debt I never chose. This isn't just about money, I said finally, my eyes burning with unshed tears. This is about trust, about what family is supposed to mean, and about what happens when the people you love most use that love as a weapon. The room was silent when I finished. Even Jessica had stopped crying. The judge's ruling came swiftly: fraud. Liability shifted off my name. Restitution required. For the first time in my life, the scales tipped in my favor. But walking out of that courtroom, I didn't feel like I had won. I felt like I had buried something. The illusion of family. The last fragile thread of hope that they would ever choose me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the skyline outside my window. My phone buzzed with messages, friends offering congratulations, coworkers sending support. But my family's silence. And in that silence, I found something I had never known before: freedom. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their invisible daughter. I was mine. The weeks after the verdict felt strange, almost dreamlike. I had expected to feel triumphant, to feel like I had finally climbed out of a pit I'd been buried in for years. Instead, what I felt was a heavy quiet. The kind of quiet that lingers after a storm tears through a town, leaving debris scattered across the streets. Yes, the sky was clearer, but the ruins were still there staring at me, reminding me that some things don't get rebuilt. My parents didn't call. Jessica didn't either. The silence from them was louder than all the years of arguments, louder than all the times I'd been told to understand, to be patient, to be the strong one. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one reaching out to mend the fracture. I wasn't the one apologizing for existing. I let the silence stretch, and in its length, I started to heal. But healing isn't easy. Some nights I lay awake wondering if I had been too harsh, if perhaps I had burned the bridge when I could have simply closed the gate. And then I'd remember the mortgage documents, the fake signature that had nearly stolen my future. I'd remember Jessica's voice saying it was just paperwork. I'd remember my father pounding his fist on the table, shouting that I would manage. And I'd remind myself, no, I hadn't burned the bridge. They had set it on fire the day they chose betrayal over honesty. Life, though, has a way of moving forward even when you're not ready. I went back to work. I paid my bills. I even treated myself to small luxuries, flowers on my kitchen table, a new pair of shoes that didn't come from the clearance rack. They were small acts, but to me, they were declarations: I am free. And yet family has a way of creeping back in, even through cracks you thought you sealed. One afternoon, as I was leaving my office, I found Jessica waiting by my car. Her eyes were puffy, her hair unkempt, a shadow of the sister who once pranced through life as though consequences didn't exist. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. I stiffened. What do you want? Her lip trembled. I lost the house. They repossessed the car. Mom and Dad won't talk to me. I don't have anyone else. Her words should have broken me. Once they would have. The little girl in me still longed for a sister who would hold my hand, who would see me. But looking at her now, I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. You had me, I said softly. But you chose to use me instead of love me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't know what else to do. I nodded. You could have told the truth. You could have asked. You could have treated me like family, but you didn't. She reached for me then, but I stepped back. I hope you find your way, Jess, but I can't be your safety net anymore. Her sobs followed me as I got into my car, but I didn't look back. For the first time, I realized walking away wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Weeks turned into months. My attorney closed the case. The bank cleared my name. Slowly, the world began to trust me again. Credit scores inching upward, opportunities no longer out of reach. I started saving not for someone else's dream, but for mine. A small condo, sunlight streaming through big windows, a kitchen that smelled like the meals I cooked for myself and no one else. For the first time, I was building a life untouched by their hands. And yet betrayal leaves a scar you can't always see. Sometimes when I signed my own name, my hand shook as though I were trying to prove to myself that it was mine and mine alone. Sometimes when I lay in bed, I still heard my mother's voice saying, "It's not a big deal." Those moments stung. But then I'd remember the courtroom, the judges ruling, the sound of the gavel cutting through decades of silence, and I'd breathe easier. The last time I saw my parents was 6 months later at a distant cousin's wedding. They looked older, smaller, like the weight of their choices had finally pressed them into the ground. My father avoided my gaze. My mother tried to smile, but her eyes were clouded with something I couldn't quite name. Shame, maybe? Or the faint hope that I'd forget everything. I didn't. But I also didn't confront them. Not that day. I realized then that vengeance wasn't about destroying them. It was about refusing to let them destroy me. I had already won. And that's when it struck me. Revenge doesn't always come in fire and fury. Sometimes revenge is silence. Sometimes revenge is success. Sometimes revenge is simply living your life on your own terms, free from the chains they tried to lock around you. That night, back in my small condo, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window watching the city lights flicker like stars brought down to earth. I thought about the girl I used to be, the quiet daughter, the invisible sister, the one who carried the weight of everyone else's mistakes. And I whispered to her, "You made it out. You're free now." Because I am free. And I will never let anyone write my name on chains again. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from the very people meant to love you, I hope you'll like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories told from the heart, and leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me how you broke free. Because sometimes the greatest power we have is in telling the truth out loud.